The folder sits on the conference table between us like something that had been waiting a long time to be opened. It is 9:47 in the morning. The room smells like burnt coffee, and the particular kind of silence that happens when 11 people are all watching the same door. My father's lawyer has just finished reading aloud a number, $432,000, and the air has not moved since. My mother's hands are folded in her lap, so tightly that the knuckles have gone the color of old bone. My father is staring at the folder. He knows what's inside. He has known for 6 months. He just didn't believe I would actually put it there. Rashid is not in this room. He has not been in any room for 4 months. The chair where he would have sat is empty, and I am not going to look at it. I pick up the folder. I open it. I place the first page in front of my father's lawyer. Let's begin, I say. Welcome to Calm Revenge Tales, where the people who were written off get the last word, and justice arrives quietly, on its own schedule. If you're new here, subscribe before we go any further. You're going to want to be here for the whole thing. My name is Priya Subramania Mokafor. I am a licensed mechanical engineer. I spent 11 years at a firm in Pune before I left to take over the maintenance contracts for 3 mid-sized manufacturing plants in the Nashik corridor. I am not rich, but I have never missed a payroll. I drive a 7-year-old Mahindra, and I know how to rewire a junction box in the dark. I tell you this not to impress you, but because my family has always spoken about my work the way people speak about a minor hobby. Something I do between the real moments of my life. The real moments, in their accounting, were supposed to be the ones they arranged. I met Rashid Malek in the summer of 2019. He was repairing the compressor on a walk-in chiller at a food processing plant I was consulting for, and he had done it better than the service manual called for. I noticed. We talked for 40 minutes about pressure tolerances while standing in 17 degrees Celsius, and he did not once try to explain the engineering to me. We were married in a civil ceremony 14 months later, small and precise, exactly what we both wanted. Rashid was a refrigeration and HVAC technician. He had no degree. He had left school at 16 to support his mother after his father died, and he had spent the following 22 years becoming one of the most capable diagnostic technicians in Western Maharashtra. He could hear a failing bearing through a wall. He could smell an electrical fault before the meter confirmed it. My parents called him the AC repairman. Not to wound him, I think. Just because that was the easiest container for a man they had decided not to understand. Rashid never said anything about it. When they called, he answered politely. When they didn't call, he cooked. He made a lamb keema with whole spices that took 3 hours and filled our apartment with something that smelled like patience. My father, Venkatesh Subramaniam, owns a plastics component factory in Sinnar. The kind of operation that employs 86 people, and has been exactly 1 bad quarter away from real trouble since 2017. My mother, Kamala, managed the household and the social calendar with the precision of someone who believed that appearances were load-bearing. In November 2021, they called to tell us about the engagement party for my cousin Divya. 2 days, at a resort near Mahabaleshwar. The family would gather. There would be food, ceremony, the expected photographs. There was one condition, stated at the end of the call, after all the other details had been given, so there would be no logical place to argue. Come alone, my mother said. We'll introduce you properly. Without complication. Without complication. That was the word they had chosen for Rashid. I told Rashid that evening. He was standing at the stove, reducing a tomato base, and he said without turning around, "You should go. Divya will want you there." That was his first line. Generous and exact, like most of what he said. I called my mother back. I said Rashid and I would both be coming, or neither of us would. She said that was a very dramatic way to frame a simple preference. I said I would see her on Friday. We drove up together on Friday morning. The resort was 3 hours and 1,700 feet of elevation. The air when we arrived smelled like eucalyptus and the morning before rain. Rashid looked at the mountains and said, "Good country for a compressor." I laughed. He was already calculating the ambient temperature differential. There were 22 family members at the welcome dinner. Rashid wore a pressed white kurta and shook every hand offered to him, and declined to offer his hand where it wasn't. I watched my parents watch him from across the room. Not with cruelty exactly, but with a kind of braced discomfort, the way you look at a problem you have not yet solved. The second evening, after the ceremony and before the dinner on the lawn, my uncle Praveen, my father's eldest brother, the one whose opinion my father had been deferring to since 1983, walked up to Rashid and asked him, in front of perhaps 9 people, including Divya and her fiancé, if he'd had a chance to look at the resort's air conditioning unit. I noticed it cycling strangely on the way in, Praveen said. He smiled when he said it. That was the part that stays with me. Rashid looked at him for a moment. I did notice that, he said. The condenser coil looked partially fouled on the east unit, probably losing 15% efficiency. Praveen laughed. He looked around at the others. He said, always working, these people. These people. 2 words. I watched Rashid's face. It did not change, but his right hand, which had been resting on the arm of the chair, became very still. My mother looked at the tablecloth. She did not say anything. She pressed her lips together, and I saw, just for a moment, something pass across her face that might have been recognizable as shame if she had let it stay longer. She didn't. I stood up. I said, very quietly, that we were leaving. Praveen said I was being sensitive. My father said my name in the tone he'd used since I was 12. The one meant to remind me of everything I owed. One of the younger cousins, a boy named Sarab who was perhaps 25, started to say something and then stopped. Rashid was already standing. He placed his napkin on the table with the same care he brought to everything. He turned to Divya and said, congratulations. He seems like a good man. That was his second line. We walked to the car. I was the one who paid for the fuel. We moved into a larger flat in Nashik the following March. Not because we needed the space but because I had taken on a 4th maintenance contract, a textile finishing plant in Ahmedabad, and I needed a proper workspace at home. The additional contract paid well. It also meant that Rashid, who had his own clients, and I were both working 6 days a week and occasionally into the evenings. We made a chart for the refrigerator. Mundakima. Tuesday Dow. Friday. Whatever needed to be used before it expired. It was not glamorous. It was ours. My mother called twice that year. Both times, she began with small talk and arrived after some time, at the suggestion that perhaps Rashid and I might want to revisit our living arrangements, by which she meant the arrangement of our marriage. Both times I said we were fine and changed the subject. The second time, she mentioned that there was a very suitable man, an IT manager, who was in need of a partner with my qualifications. I said goodbye and ended the call. There was a blue folder in the bottom drawer of Rashid's desk. He had mentioned it once, early in our marriage, and then not again. It was thin. It had a rubber band around it. On the label, in his careful handwriting, were the words, Subramaniam Industrial, Ref 2018-19. I did not open it. It was his folder and he had not invited me in. Over the months I noticed it moved. It was in the drawer, then on the desk, then in the bag he carried to site visits, then back in the drawer, with a second document tucked under the rubber band. He never mentioned it. One Saturday he made the lamb keema again. The full 3-hour version. He explained to me, while he tempered the whole spices, that the trick was that you had to let the fat render completely before the onions went in. Most people are impatient, he said. They rush the fat and wonder why the base tastes thin. I was watching him and writing a maintenance report and thinking about pressure tolerances, and it was one of the better evenings of my life. If you have stayed with this story this far, you already understand what kind of man Rashid was. Subscribe to Calm Revenge Tales. The rest of this story is coming, and you don't want it to find you somewhere else. Rashid was diagnosed in August of 2022. Pancreatic. Stage 3. We were told there were options. We pursued all of them specifically and without panic. He completed 2 rounds of treatment and then, in January of 2023, he told me he was done with the hospital and wanted to come home. He lived 4 more months at home. He slept late. He gave me his notes on every client he had. He wrote careful emails of introduction so they would know who to call after. He ate what he could, when he could, and on the days he could not eat, he sat in the kitchen anyway and told me what to do. Toward the end, he told me where the blue folder was. He said, "There's something in there for your father." I kept meaning to give it to him, but the timing was never right, and then it was something else. "You'll know when." That was his third line. I have thought about it nearly every day since. He died on a Thursday in April. The apartment smelled like cardamom for a week afterward, and I did not open any windows. I opened the blue folder on a Friday morning, 3 weeks later, with both hands on the table and the document in front of me. Inside was a report, 41 pages, technical, precise, dated September 2018. It was a refrigeration and compressor diagnostic assessment of subromanium industrial components, SINAR, commissioned by my father's own bank, as part of a routine evaluation before approving an equipment loan. The bank's assessor had flagged 16 deficiencies in the factory's cooling and pneumatic systems and recommended against full loan approval. Rashid had been called in as a second opinion, quietly, through a contact at the bank. He had spent 2 days at the factory. His report disagreed with the assessors on 9 of the 16 points. He had documented his findings with photographs, meter readings, ambient temperature logs. He had identified 3 issues the first assessor had missed entirely, and had correctly diagnosed 2 others that would have caused production shutdowns within 18 months. He had recommended full approval. The bank had approved the loan. My father's factory had received 43,50,000 rupees in financing. They had upgraded their systems. They had survived 2019. Rashid had never said a word about it. Not to my father. Not to me. At the bottom of the report there was a handwritten note in Rashid's writing. This was before I met Priya. I did the work because it was the right assessment. I am including this for the record, in case it ever becomes useful. RM. I called my father's lawyer. Then I called a family mediator. Then I called my father. We met at my father's office on a Thursday in September. I had asked for a meeting to discuss the estate. My father had not spoken to me since Rashid died, a silence I had not chased. He arrived with my mother and Praveen's son, who is a lawyer. He looked tired. He had aged in ways I had not tracked. I placed the blue folder on the conference table. I said, "Before we discuss anything else, I want you to read the document on top." Praveen's son started to object. My father held up one hand. He read it. It took him 11 minutes. I know because I watched the clock. When he finished, he put it down. He did not look up for a long time. His hands went very still on the table, the way Rashid's had on the arm of that chair in Mahabaleshwar. My mother made a sound, a sharp, startled sound, not quite a word. She said, "That can't be," and stopped. Praveen said loudly that it was irrelevant. That old business had nothing to do with the current question. That I was weaponizing a dead man's paperwork, that this was manipulation. I let him finish. Then I said what I had been carrying for 4 months, quietly to the room. He told me it was the right assessment. He didn't do it for us. He hadn't met me yet. He did it because the factory employed 86 people, and the first report was wrong. I set the next page in front of the lawyer. It was a letter from the bank, confirming the assessment's role in their decision. The number 43,50,000 is in the second paragraph. Praveen went quiet. His son looked at the ceiling. My father looked at the empty chair to my left, the one I had not looked at since I arrived. Praveen's son started to say something about legal relevance. My father said very quietly, "Stop." That was all he said. The estate was not complex. Rashid had a modest account, a van, his tools, his client list, which I had already taken over, properly, with his client's knowledge. He had also, it turned out, named me the sole contact on a small insurance policy. None of that is the point. The point is the phone call my father made 2 weeks after the meeting. He called and asked if I would come to the factory. Not to the house. Not to dinner. To the factory. I drove to Sinnar. He met me at the gate himself. which he had not done since I was a child. He walked me through the floor. He showed me the compressor units, the newer ones installed after the loan. He said without looking at me, "The technician who installed these. His name is in the records." It was Rashid's name. Different job, different year, different contract. But Rashid's name, in my father's own maintenance log. My father said, "I didn't know." I said, "I know you didn't." He offered me a place on the factory's maintenance advisory board. He made the offer sincerely, and the offer was real. But it came with a condition, unstated, just present in the architecture of the conversation, that we would not discuss Rashid again in formal contexts. I thanked him. I declined. I had told him I would make one offer. I did. He declined it. I drove back to Nashik with both hands on the wheel and no particular feeling of triumph. My mother wrote me a letter. 3 pages handwritten. She apologized for specific things, which I respected. She did not apologize for Mahableshwar, which I also noted. I wrote back 2 paragraphs. I told her I was open to a conversation, but not urgency. Praveen has not contacted me. His son sent one email that I read and did not answer. The factory is still running. 86 people still work there. I had nothing to do with that, and Rashid had everything to do with it, and neither of us will ever say that out loud in a room with my father, because my father already knows it, and that is sufficient. I run 4 maintenance contracts now. I am training a young woman named Shubhangi who is 23, the daughter of a man who worked for Rashid, and who knows more about compressor diagnostics than most people twice her age. On Monday mornings I make dal. I am not as good at it as Rashid was. I am getting better. The blue folder lives in the top drawer of my desk now. I replaced the rubber band with a proper clip. On the front, I kept his handwriting, Subramaniam Industrial, Ref 2018-19, because that is what he was, a man who did precise work and kept a record, and trusted that the record would matter, in the right time, in the right hands. He was not wrong. If this story stayed with you, if you thought of someone who was dismissed, who worked without credit, who kept their own quiet record, go find them today. Tell them you see the work. That's it. That's enough. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment. I read every one. Subscribe to Calm Revenge Tales, because justice doesn't announce itself. It arrives on a Thursday morning, inside a blue folder, when the room finally goes quiet enough to listen. I'll see you in the next one.